warning, sailor's warning. However, following a volcanic eruption a century ago, it wasn't just the sailors worried about red skies. It was people all around the world. In August 1883, one of the most powerful explosions in history occurred when the volcanic island Krakatoa erupted. I've always been fascinated by natural disasters, especially when they can change the surface of the earth, or in this case, the skies as well. So today, I'll give you a brief intro to the history of Krakatoa. We'll go over where and what it was, its activity in the summer of 1883, the catastrophic eruptions in August of that year, and the effects that it had on the world. We'll begin with the basics. Where and what was Krakatoa? Krakatoa was a small island in the Indian Ocean. More precisely, it was located in between the larger, more populated islands of Java and Sumatra. This island was small, about 3 miles wide by 5 miles long, and consisted of 3 volcanic peaks, Perboatan to the north, Danan in the center, and Rakata, the tallest of the 3 at the bottom. An eruption on the scale of Krakatoa does not just happen. There's often smaller eruptions and earthquakes preceding it. Such was the case in 1883. After being dormant for 200 years, Krakatoa resumed activity early that year. An earthquake struck the area May 10th, and no more than 10 days later, the northernmost peak, Perboatan, began erupting. These eruptions continued throughout the summer, increasing not only in intensity, but also in number, and by August 11th, all 3 volcanoes on the island were erupting. These eruptions were impressive in their own right, but compared to the next eruptions, they were pretty much harmless. The renewed activity of the volcano led to a series of powerful explosions on August 26th and 27th. The first of these occurred August 26th midday, when an explosion rocked the area and was heard for 100 miles around. This eruption sent ash clouds rising more than 17 miles into the air, and later on, the same ash clouds would continue to rise to a height of 22 miles. 3 more powerful eruptions on the same scale occurred early morning, August 27th, the last of which was at 10 a.m. This was undoubtedly the most powerful eruption, as according to the Royal Society, who wrote a extensive report on Krakatoa in 1888, the mere sound of it was heard 2,000 miles away in Perth, Australia, and more than 3,000 miles away at a small island called Rodriguez. Following this last eruption, the 2 northernmost peaks collapsed into the empty magma chamber below, forming what is known as a caldera. Danan went from 1,400 feet above sea level to 800 feet below. The northern half of the island was completely underwater. Though this last eruption was heard for thousands of miles around, Krakatoa wasn't done with the world just yet. The final eruption affected people worldwide in several different ways. The most immediate of these were something called pyroclastic flows. Pyroclastic flows are a mixture of superheated volcanic ash, gases, and rock particles from the eruption. These flows move down the slope of a hillside close after an eruption, reaching speeds of up to 100 miles an hour. In Krakatoa's case, these flows did 2 things. 1, according to a website from San Diego State University, How Volcanoes Work, there's evidence that suggests some of the flows actually traveled over the ocean, some 24 miles to the island of Sumatra, where they remained hot enough to incinerate parts of the island. The flows that didn't make it over the ocean plunged straight in, displacing massive amounts of water. This, combined with the island's collapse, generated tsunamis that were over 120 feet tall. These tsunamis were responsible for more than 36,000 deaths alone. The most widely experienced effect of Krakatoa's eruption was the ash clouds it sent into the air. The finer particles of the ash continued to rise high into the stratosphere and circulated around the globe for years to come. People all over the world, New York, London, Beijing, were experiencing things like vivid sunsets, solar halos, and colored moons. In his book on the subject, released in 2003, Simon Winchester tells the story of a group of New York firemen. In November 1883, months after this eruption, these firemen were dispatched because they had seen fires in the distance. Well, they made it to the river and discovered the fires were a little bit farther away than they had thought. As it turns out, there weren't any fires, just the illusion of one, a vivid sunset caused by none other than Krakatoa. So today, you've learned about the island of Krakatoa, its activity in the year 1883, the final eruptions in August, and the effects that it had on the world. So the next time you're climbing Mount Rainier, or say Mount Shasta, remember that they too are dormant volcanoes, and could someday be the next Krakatoa.